Hey everybody, welcome back to Video Game Mess. So, Getting series, who's Nintendo is suing or screwing this week, but in this instance, it's actually Nintendo taking the big loss. Because if you don't remember, and I will leave a link in the description below if I remember, and I usually don't, last time we talked about this, no other than the head of the US Patent Office ordered a re-review on all of the capture mechanic patents Nintendo was granted in the US. And considering they had already lost them in Japan, I said, and I was very clear, that Nintendo should have never been given these patents in the first place based upon prior art examples, and that I 100% believe that Nintendo would lose every single patent that they were granted in the US. And I mean this in a nice, loving way, but the people that came in said clickbait and told me I was fear-mongering that would never happen. One of you even bet me a drink. You guys owe me. Now you can leave the apology down below because that's exactly what happened as I stated. And if you watch my channel, you know I don't usually take these victory laps, but I have pretty much an extensive history in IP and copyright law for film and entertainment. I have taught college courses to college students about entertainment business law. I've also worked in overall copyright and design as far as actual consumer goods are concerned, as well as having films of mine distributed and dealing with a bunch of music licensing in the past. So basically for almost my entire career, I have dealt with these sort of things. And it's one of those things I do know what I'm talking about, even if not every single person will believe me. But it is one of those things. These patents should have never been granted when they were actually granted. I discussed in video 4, but there is a playlist for this so you can go back and watch just how weak of patents these truly were. And I asked you guys to give me different examples of other games where you could throw something into the playfield and then basically control or otherwise interact with a fight in front of you. And I had so many incredible examples, and the reality of the situation is what Nintendo was trying to patent had been done hundreds upon hundreds of times before, and that's what I mean by prior art. A patent will not be granted if there is an example of it being used before the patent was filed, because patents are basically first to file here. It's one of those things you can't just make something up and say you're going to patent it. If it's already existed, it doesn't work that way, and that is why some of the anti-Palworld patents, as some of the news people are calling it, were rejected in Japan and revoked entirely. And that's exactly what happened in the US as well. Every single one of Nintendo's patents that they had obtained about this capture and overall fighting mechanic have been completely rescinded. Now this is a non-final decision because basically in US courts with patents in cases like this there is a gigantic appeal process. What it means right now is the patents that Nintendo had obtained are no longer relevant. And that really is interesting, as you'll see here, it's about summoning sub-characters and letting them fight in one of two modes. And obviously you can think of 100 games that do exactly that, so leave me a comment down below. And it really has been fun going over all of these different examples as to how Nintendo never invented this concept in the first place and seemed to try to just patent things so they could actually aid themselves in their Palworld lawsuit. And again, the only reason I think Nintendo is suing Palworld in the first place is Palworld and Pocketpair were eating Nintendo's lunch when it came to the overall genre of quote-unquote Pokemon. Nintendo thinks that they should be the only ones that are able to touch a genre that seems like that, and when someone else is successful with it, they decide to take it to the courts because if you can't outcompete somebody, you may as well just try to sue them out of business. And that is why it was such a big deal when the head of the US Patent Office ordered this re-examination himself, because the last time it was done was like 2012, I believe. It had been almost 15 years since the actual head of the office had said, I think we've made a grave mistake here, we need to look into the entire process. That is what has happened, and again, even using something like Sega bass fishing, affecting something in front of you, some combat mechanic or otherwise, there's 100 different examples you could use talking about how you could do this, and that's one of those fun things. Patents can be vague, but they can't be so vague as to basically have an all-encompassing patent across an entire swath of gameplay. You're not going to patent press A to jump, and that's kind of how this patent vibe was going here. And there's so many different examples that weren't used in core again, but this is still an ongoing thing. The Palworld lawsuit in Japan is still happening, and clearly Nintendo wanted these patents in the US as well. They could probably try to grow that lawsuit into the US market, because the US market is definitely the world leader when it comes to how much money is spent on video games. So Nintendo trying to get all these patents here as well was definitely a precursor to trying to sue Pocketpair, the parent company of Palworld, in different regions. And that just kind of always felt a little bit greasy as far as Nintendo is concerned, but again, it is Nintendo, so not that surprising. And going over all of the paperwork here, I find this infinitely interesting, but I understand if you're not going to read all of the different rulings here. But basically what this all came down to was re-examining what Nintendo had patented and seeing whether or not any other developer or any other artist had used it in the same context before Nintendo would actually patent it. because you need to have a novel and unique concept to obtain a patent. And obviously with this entire video series and everyone commenting, you realize that Nintendo really hadn't invented anything here whatsoever. That is the thing, patents are important. If you actually come up with something that has never been done before, never been seen before, you do deserve that patent protection. You don't deserve it when you're just basically trying to patent a concept or an invention that already exists so you can prop yourself up in a court of law when you're suing a competitor. And I do have a couple patents to my name from a very long time ago when I worked at Burton. I did this in conjunction with Motorola when we had a specific jacket that would actually have Bluetooth connectivity, wiring all the way up the sleeves, into speakers, into the hood, and had a microphone. And I did a little bit of work on the communication as well as a new wiring system that hadn't been done before, basically allowing you to contort your body in all manner of ways and not actually break any of that wiring. And that's something that we were able to obtain a patent for because basically we whole cloth made it up in the back workroom at Burton. And granted, I'm not an engineer and I did have help with this with a couple other people who are also not engineers, but we shared that patent because it invented something that hadn't been seen before. But when you take into account what Nintendo wants here, you can come up with any manner of example that says they have not actually created anything. And that is why I always talked about Nintendo kind of using the court system to their own advantage, because they always try to sue people even if they might be wrong, because reality is they play by the golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules, and when Nintendo takes court cases out on people, 99 out of 100 times it is against somebody who can't afford to actually fight back. The reality of the situation is, though, Palworld has been immensely successful. It has done billions of dollars in revenue, and the parent company Pocketpair definitely has the overall pocketbook to be able to actually represent themselves in court and try to win against Nintendo. And now that Nintendo is losing these patents across multiple different countries and regions, it is not going to look good in a court case when a lot of what they were suing on no longer actually exists. And again, I can't stress enough, the head of the US Patent Office doesn't just pop up and say you need to re-examine something if it isn't a clear-cut case of why the hell did we do this in the first place. Because these patents, again, are just so prohibited. If these things have been allowed to stand, basically like 35-40% of every single video game would probably be violating them in some way, shape, or form. And that is not a future we want to live in, where developers and publishers basically try to patent these broad swath things, and then all of a sudden your game can't actually be a game because you're worried about getting sued about something. So this is definitely, in my opinion, a very positive thing for gaming in general, and don't think I hate Nintendo on the channel. Yes, I talk about all their lawsuits just because they're the ones that are always launching them all the time. Their fight against emulation, their fight against Palworld, and everything else you see them do, even taking down sheet music that has different melodies from Nintendo songs in it. But something like this really did feel predatory. They just want to control a mechanic that is so fundamentally part of gaming at this point in time. And that is why all of these things were invalidated on prior art. And to get a little bit more specific about that, basically the patent examiner found that every one of the patents that Nintendo had gotten, 26 in fact, every single one of them could be invalidated by evidence that somebody or multiple somebodies had done it before Nintendo had ever actually talked about it. And you can go through all of the different patents here. This one's from Bandai Namco that was referenced by prior art. Honestly, it is very in-depth, it is very intense, but my favorite thing about it is whatever figure they're using here to denote the character in the game kind of looks like some sort of robot, almost like one of the robots from the Portal franchise. And going through patents, something I like to do for videos here, they are staggeringly complex and deep, but when you actually read them, you think to yourself, oh, this is exactly what Nintendo is talking about, just somebody actually got there first. And that is why these patent examination offices exist in the first place, because there are people that are trained to go ahead and do the research to find out whether or not a patent should be granted in the first place. And I think that's why the actual director of the US Patent Office ordered this himself, the re-examination, because again, I don't know how Nintendo got the patents in the first place, but they definitely should not have been granted. But now the good news is for basically all of gamers and all of game developers out there is those patents have been removed. And the simple fact is you do not want to live in a future where patents can be obtained and then abused and used in court for the most basic of gameplay mechanics. Gaming needs to be open, gaming needs to be a community thing, and if this was actually to work, you would see multiple different companies out there try to patent the simplest of things so that they could kind of corner the market on what it is they wanted to do. And again, I don't hate Nintendo, I think they make incredible games, and I think they make incredibly bad and sometimes predatory business and legal decisions to try to protect the market. but it is what it is. Nintendo's been doing that since the NES days. But again, a couple of different people, probably like 15 or 20, just absolutely got angry at me when I said these patents would get revoked and deserve to get revoked. So again, if you want to leave that apology down below, go ahead. And if you're the one person that bet me a drink that they wouldn't lose these, I'll send you my PayPal and you can go ahead and give me that $10. See you next time. Bye-bye.